our staff meeting, February 7th, 2023. We'll start with introductions on the dais.
Chrissy Rischel, Assistant Clerk.
Leslie Hervey, Clerk to the Board. Stephanie Summerall Dumas, Commissioner.
Good afternoon. I'm County Commissioner Denise Driehaus.
Jeff Aludo, County Administrator. Michael Friedman.
And I am Commissioner Alicia Reese, President of the Board. We will start on our agenda. Item number 1 is strategies to end homelessness. And we have Kevin Finn here, who is the President CEO of Strategies to End Homelessness. And wanted to also highlight that Commissioner Dumas brought up some great questions. And we thought it would be best to have you come and present at the staff meeting so everyone has an update on we see a lot of grants that we're passing, but an update on where we are as it relates to this. So welcome back. Well, Happy New Year. It's your first time this year.
First time this year. Thank you very much for having me. Again, I'm Kevin Finn with Strategies to End Homelessness. I'll start with just a little bit of history. I started out as a street outreach worker in the late 90s and spent 6 years doing street outreach. And what I noticed during that time was homeless service agencies didn't really talk to each other very much less coordinate their efforts. So what I recognized while I was a street outreach worker was that there was a significant need for better coordination of homeless services in Hamilton County. At the same time, at the federal level in 2006, there was legislation proposed that required that if communities were going to get significant funding from the Department of Housing and Urban Development for homeless services, that they had to have a lead agency that would sort of oversee how those dollars got allocated. Not necessarily handle the dollars, but oversee how they got allocated. That presented the opportunity sort of for me to start Strategies to End Homelessness. So that's sort of some of the background as to where we came from as an organization. Our mission is to lead a coordinated community effort to end homelessness in Greater Cincinnati. Our primary footprint is Hamilton County, but since there's no equivalent organization in the surrounding areas, we help out as requested to do so by partner agencies in surrounding areas as well. This slide that I think you all have in front of you is a couple different ways that I describe what our job is, but I think the most significant for today is the last bullet point. It is our job to make sure our partner agencies have the resources they need to assist people experiencing homelessness. So the resources that we oversee, we pass through to our partner agencies to serve people experiencing homelessness. This is a list of our partner agencies. So there are about 30 different organizations, that about 22 of them, which we specifically provide funding to, that we pass funding through to. Some of them are not interested in taking government funding and that sort of thing. So there are some on this list who we coordinate their work, but we don't specifically have a funding relationship with them. But I'll repeatedly say partner agencies, this is who I'm referring to. This slide is sort of a visual of the system which we oversee, just so you know sort of what I'm talking about. This is a visual that I use as sort of a quick walkthrough. So we try to do 3 things. We try to prevent as many people as possible from becoming homeless. We try to provide assistance to people who are homeless, and we offer solutions to homelessness through housing. So you can see in this visual, there are 3 floors. The first floor is prevention. So we are involved in eviction prevention work. We also oversee what's called shelter diversion, which is for people who have already lost their own housing and they're sleeping couch to couch with friends and family and running out of couches to sleep on. And their next stop is going to be the street or a shelter. Many people, including myself, would consider those folks to already be homeless. The federal government does not, which is why we list that shelter diversion as a type of prevention. And we have 3 partner agencies in the diversion program. I also list problem solving as a prevention activity. Sometimes it's as simple as connecting people to resources they didn't know about to keep them from becoming homeless. So eviction prevention, shelter diversion, problem solving are the things we do with our partner agencies related to prevention. Then the middle floor is assisting people who are currently homeless. This lines up with who the Department of Housing and Urban Development considers to be homeless. So it says street, shelter, and domestic violence. So those are the three situations. You could sort of translate that as literally homeless. If you're on the street, a resident of a shelter, or fleeing domestic violence, then you're considered homeless. We have 4 street outreach partner agencies, 10 homeless shelters operated by 8 different organizations who are our partners, and then the YWCA is our domestic violence partner agency. The top floor, solutions to homelessness through housing, we oversee 3 types of housing programs that our partner agencies provide. You can sort of think of them as short, medium, and long. Rapid rehousing is for people who are basically ready to be self-sufficient. They just need some help getting back on their feet. So in rapid rehousing, we do a deposit and a few months' rent to get people back into their own housing. Transitional housing is a little more long-term, up to 24 months. Works particularly well for homeless youth who've never lived on their own in housing before, victims of domestic violence who need a little more security while they're getting back on their feet, and also people who are trying to maintain their sobriety. So those are the best candidates for transitional housing. And we have, again, multiple partner agencies that do transitional housing. Then the third type is what's called permanent supportive housing. That is for chronically homeless, disabled people. So our key partners in that space are Tender Mercies, Talbert House, Caracol. We pass through funding to all of them to run permanent supportive housing programs. Then on this visual, I always have to mention, especially I think it's interesting to the county, the fire escape, the gray on this visual, that is the Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing Authority and their Housing Choice Voucher Program. They give us access to the Housing Choice Voucher Program at a rate that most communities can only dream of. They have been an incredibly good partner for helping people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. So if circumstances warrant, no matter where someone was sort of in this visual, we can get them into the Housing Choice Voucher Program if that's what's needed for their long-term stability. So that's sort of a quick overview of what the system we oversee looks like. And the slide before that is the agencies that actually we work with to provide all those services. Hamilton County is extremely unique. I cannot, if you remember one thing, I would like you to remember that. It's extremely unique. HUD funds 400 communities in the country through their Continuum of Care program. And if you just look at this timeline of things that we have done in Hamilton County, in 2012, we were one of 6 to pilot the Rapid Rehousing Program. In 2014, we were one of 2 to lead an LGBTQ youth homelessness prevention pilot. We were one of the first communities in the country to implement the Housing First model system-wide in 2015. Also in 2015, we started that partnership with CMHA for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. I have literally been invited to national conferences to speak just on that partnership. It is such the envy of other communities. So something that is very unique about Hamilton County. Also in 2016, we Strategies were chosen as a unified funding agent. We were the 3rd out of those 400 communities and are still one of only 14 that is a unified funding agent. That's really the point at which we started handling most of the money. That's really where we got into the money. From 2008 to 2015, we were coordinating those agencies basically on our powers of persuasion because it was the right thing to do. We didn't actually start handling the money until 2015. A couple things that I think it's worth mentioning about that unified funding agent status. The very first year, we figured out that our partner agencies had been turning back a grand total of $1.2 million. About 8% of the HUD funding was being turned back to HUD. And since the money was then flowing through us, we were able to recapture those dollars that year and every year since. and make sure that those dollars stay in Hamilton County to help people experiencing homelessness. As a unified funding agent, we're more competitive for getting additional funding, which is a big part of what we do, is raising additional money that we pass through to our partner agencies. As a UFA, we have flexibility other communities don't have. If youth homelessness is rising and the population of people experiencing homelessness with HIV goes down, we have the ability with their agreement to shift dollars between organizations like Caracol and Lighthouse. That ability does not exist in the other 386 communities across the country that are not unified funding agents. I think another thing that's important about us stepping into that role of handling that money is it took 100% agreement from every HUD-funded agency in Hamilton County for us to get that status. If they hadn't thought it was good for our system for us to become a unified funding agent, we would not have been able to. So these are all ways that the system here in Hamilton County is unique. To mention a few others, 2017, we were one of the first 10 communities in the country chosen to lead a youth homelessness demonstration program. We partner with 8451 since 2017, the data analytics company downtown, to analyze our homelessness data to make sure we're targeting resources the best way we possibly can. As I mentioned to you all briefly, the last time I was here, in 2022, we received $5 million from the Bezos Day One Families Fund. That is a perfect example of what we do at Strategies to End Homelessness. That's $5 million we went out and raised that we will pass through to our partner agencies. That is not for us, that is for them. And those dollars are specifically targeted at family homelessness. So a big part of what we do, because we administer the funding, we are able to see where there are gaps. There is some service that is needed that none of our agencies provide, and there's no funding for it. We can go out and look for funding to support and fill those gaps in the system. So that's a big part of what we do and what we will do with that Bezos funding. To give you a little breakdown of the dollars, so this is how much money we're talking about. So we receive just over $29 million a year total in federal funding, about $2.5 million in state and local funding. We run the Central Access Point, which is the shelter coordinated intake. So some of the agencies do contribute to us to support that intake process because it eliminates the need for them to each have their own intake process. So there are some service fees. And then this is a normal year, about $500,000 we go out and raise from private sources to, again, fill gaps in the system. This is a list of some of the funding sources. So several of these are HUD. Some are COVID-related, Ohio Housing Trust Fund. We receive city human services funding for the shelter diversion program. We administer $2 million from the Hamilton County Indigent Care Levy that we pass through to 4 shelters to provide services to people. So that's just sort of a list of the funding sources. I think this slide, which is our expenses, is an important part to understand as well. 90% of the money goes right back out the door in subrecipient agreements to our partner agencies. Then 3% goes toward the expenses of running the Central Access Point, which again is the shelter intake line, and other HUD requirements. HUD also requires something called coordinated entry, which means that when there's an opening in your housing program, the person who needs it the most, based on an assessment they have received, they get that opening, as opposed to the way it used to work, which whoever happened to call at the right moment got the opening at Tender Mercies. So you could have a person, just to use Tender Mercies as an example, so you could have, in the old days, had somebody who'd been homeless for a week get an opening in a housing program over a person who had been homeless for years. Coordinated entry is something we do to make sure that the people who need those openings the most are the ones who get them. So 3% of our expenses are related to those sorts of HUD requirements. 4% are connected to the Continuum of Care program. We do all the coordination and planning for the homeless services system. We were the first community in the nation to have all of our agencies on the same homeless management information system, HMIS. So there are expenses related, and we are the administrator of that system. So some of the expenses are related to that. And then we do all the monitoring and compliance on all these dollars on HUD's behalf. HUD comes and monitors us rather than having to come and monitor 20 agencies. That's sort of what's in it for HUD, is that we do all the monitoring and compliance work. So 90% of the money straight out the door to our partners, another 7% that goes toward HUD-related requirements, and our overhead basically is 3%. A couple of results I think that it's important you all know about. The first is increased funding. Like I mentioned, we get $25 million and some change in HUD funding, which is up from $12.4 million per year when we took over running the system in 2008. Again, we get about $26 million a year, which is double the amount of money that HUD's formula says Hamilton County must receive. So according to HUD's formula in the COC program, what they call their preliminary pro rata need, Hamilton County should receive $13.01 million per year, and it's $25 million and some change. So I think, our job is to make sure that the local partner agencies have the resources they need to help people who are experiencing homelessness. Another result is fewer people on the streets. Nationally, the average is that 35% of people who are literally homeless sleep outside on the street. And in Hamilton County, 85% of our homeless population never spends a single night outside on the street. There is 5% that exclusively stays on the street. And then there's 10% that tends to go back and forth between street and shelter during the year. But even if you lump them all in together, that would be 15% on the street. And again, the national average is 35%. But then the most important result, I'm sure you've all seen headlines about how in some communities across the country, homelessness is going through the roof, is incredibly high on the rise. This is homelessness in Hamilton County, unduplicated from 2013 to 2021. You can see a, unfortunately, gradual but steady decline that we have seen. The 2022 number is up there in the corner. I didn't have time to add it to my graphic. So 6,038 people in 2022, continuing an excruciatingly slow but downward decline. At a time when many communities across the country have seen significant increases in their homeless population. Can't miss the opportunity to tell you the things that keep me up at night a little bit about the homeless population in Hamilton County. Families, unfortunately, are the future of homelessness if something does not change. We run a very thin margin in terms of providing families with shelter. We are forced to prioritize who needs a shelter bed tonight versus who can wait till literally tomorrow in terms of who we bring into shelter. There are lots of families out there that would choose to come into a shelter. Maybe the place they're currently staying is not on the street, but it's less than ideal in many ways. But we are not able to offer them a shelter bed because some other family would literally be sleeping on the streets tonight if we did. So it's very, very tight in terms of getting families into shelter at the moment that they really need it. And if you look at that second bullet point under that, the central access point is that centralized shelter helpline. We had over 2,100 families call CAP last year regarding shelter, and only 778 were placed into some sort of program. That could be either the shelter diversion program or directly into a shelter. So 2/3 of the families were turned away with nothing. Now, that doesn't mean they were literally on the street that day, because again, we're prioritizing people for placement, but there's a great need out there among families that we're not yet meeting. The $3 million in ARPA funding you all put into the shelter diversion program, which 95% families will be a big help with that, as will the $5 million in Bezos funding, because that's also targeted specifically at families. And the other thing is young people. This is not what most people expect. People tend to think of the older, the 50 or 60-year-old man as being the sort of face of homelessness. A full quarter of homeless people in Hamilton County are children under the age of 18, and over half are under the age of 35. So it is disproportionately a problem that is affecting young people. And again, my old street outreach job was doing street outreach with homeless teenagers. So that's a group that I'm particularly sensitive to what is going on with them. So those are my two causes for concern I wanted to share with you all. One other thing that's unique about Hamilton County that I'll share with you is we have an app called Street Reach that we developed with NKU that allows people, if they see someone sleeping unsheltered, to use the GPS in their phone to report the location. That information comes into our office and we send out the appropriate street outreach program to help that person. So the Street Reach app is only Greater Cincinnati. So that's something else that's unique about the system here. And those are the high points that I wanted to hit for you all. I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for your work. I would start off, I just want to make sure, on the funding you have on here, $32,533,000, your funding sources. And then you indicated that your overhead is 3% of that number? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. And where is that on the graph? Because I'm
That is
calculating.
on the second pie chart. It doesn't have a dollar amount listed, but
Okay. Yeah, because I'm coming up with $975,990, close to $1 million in overhead. Is that right? That's 3%
well,
of that number?
those other expenses, those two other small pieces, those are a part of strategies to end homelessness, but those are expenses we incur to meet those HUD requirements, such as running the homeless management information system, which is a HUD requirement, running the coordinated entry system, which is a HUD requirement. So if we want to get that $25 million a year in HUD funding, we have to do those things. Those are expenses that we incur.
Right. But that's not part of the 975,000. You indicated that the HUD system is 7%, and that comes up to about 2.27 million in expense from you from the HUD grant.
The 7% I referenced was something else. That was the.
Oh, I thought that was the HUD system.
The 7% was the money that we were turning back to HUD prior to us being a unified funding agent.
Gotcha, okay.
So, nonprofits are notorious for, coming as close to spending 100% as they can without going over, because if they go over, they have to go into their own pocket of unrestricted funding to make it whole. So what we found was there were 50 programs in Hamilton County, and they were all leaving a little bit of money on the table that was getting turned back to HUD because none of them wanted to overspend. When you added up all those little bits across 50 different agencies, it ended up being 7% of the money we were getting from HUD. It was $1.2 million. At the time, we were only getting $16 million from HUD. So one of the things we do as a UFA is we gather up all those sort of nickels and dimes that agencies are leaving on the table, and we repurpose them to whoever can use them, whoever had additional expenses or could serve additional people, and that's who the money goes to, so that we turn zero back to HUD.
Gotcha. I was just trying to get what the overhead was out of the 32 million.
I mean, the overhead would be like that 3% would, our office space, phones.
So the overhead includes your HUD cost? That's what I was trying to figure.
No, our HUD costs are in those other little.
In the other line item, yeah, so the overhead's based on what you told me on your percentage on the calculator, is $975,990 is the overhead for your organization for running this program. Is that correct?
Happy to work it through with you, but
The calculator, I'm going with the
no,
calculator.
it's
3%
not
is,
that.
okay.
Yeah, I'm not
Can
sure.
you get that to us then? If it's not 3% of 32,533,000, just on the calculator, it comes up to $975,990. But if it's something else that we're missing,
Yeah,
please let us know.
I'm sorry. Just with what I have in front of me, I'm not sure. I'm gathering. Even at, I'm sorry. You came up with how much?
$975,990.
On a $34 million budget,
32 million is what
would
you have on
still be
here.
the envy of an organization, some other organizations that administer
No,
funding.
I got you. I just wanted to, I'm not judging you. I'm just trying to get the overhead. I'm not.
Yeah, I'm happy to
I'm
work.
not judging you, I'm just getting overhead of what that is and what, you mentioned the HUD requirements, but you said that's not in your overhead, that's another line item number.
Right.
Okay. I think what my issue is, to be really honest, I think you've done some great work. I think coordinating the dollars and putting all those pieces together is great. What I have an issue on is a lot of times we vote on stuff, and the type of person that I am is when we vote on something, I go out and try to see what it does. And I've been very disappointed that we get here, we vote on a lot of stuff, which I think, certainly is the right thing to do. We don't have enough money, as you have indicated. But to get on the elevator just today, coming in, and I got more people laying outside, and I want to know, how do I fund the street workers that would be covering this area? Because we got people I vote on millions, and then I get on the elevator, push down, and I'm outside, and somebody's laying in front of our building. Someone's asking me for some money and telling us we're not doing anything. So I've been asking the administrator, and I really want to get this done. I want somebody outside. I don't want to have to go on my iPhone. I want to go down the elevator. Somebody was laying out today. They must have just got up before you got on the elevator. But they were laying down in front of our building. And it's more and more, and for me, it makes me feel like, wow, we're not doing anything. Now, this is great. We got charts and graphs and all these organizations. I don't know who's responsible for it, but I'd like to have, out of our money, out of whatever money we're putting out, I'd like to have somebody assigned to this area. Because for me, I feel like, well, dang, we ain't doing nothing. The guy's laying out here, the lady need money, somebody ain't got nothing to eat. So I know I told the administrator that it's inexcusable for me. It's not I know you got other groups. I don't know, you might not, but you just administering the money. But what group in here that's getting the money that's supposed to be doing this? And I'd like for them to have some of our money to assign somebody to be down here.
Here's the problem from my perspective. You don't have an outreach program for non-homeless panhandlers, because most of those people are not homeless. We have surveyed them. We've had the street outreach workers survey them multiple times. 2/3 of the people panhandling are not homeless. And laying out in a doorway at 1 o'clock in the afternoon is not the primary indicator. It's where people sleep at night. So the problem we have is the street outreach workers who are targeting homeless people who are sleeping on the street don't have any resource to help people who are not homeless, but who do, for whatever reason, go out and panhandle during the day. So, I'm a part of a group working with 3CDC right now where we're trying to tackle that third of the panhandling population that is homeless, because I won't kid for a second that none of them are homeless. About a third of them are homeless. But it's a very difficult issue to tackle, first because 2/3 of them are not homeless. And then even that third who are homeless, the people who are homeless who tend to be out on the street are the people who have tried every shelter and typically failed out of the shelters for a variety of reasons. They are the people with the absolute highest levels of mental health issues. So they're suffering from, common mental health symptoms. Mental health would be paranoia, anxiety, So they don't want to be in a shelter, neither would I if I was feeling paranoid or anxious, want to be in a building with 100 total strangers. So they stay out on the street instead. Similarly, the people with the most hardcore substance abuse issues, they know they're going to wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and they're going to need a hit of whatever their drug of choice is, or they're going to want to take a drink. And you can't do that in a shelter. So that is why, of that subset of panhandlers who are out on the street, that's why they're out on the street, is because of issues like that. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is the big funder of these programs, is very conscious of what the H in HUD stands for. They only pay for housing. They don't pay for drug and alcohol treatment. They don't pay for mental health treatment. And those are the things that, again, that subset of people experiencing homelessness who are out, sometimes out panhandling, that's the service they really need. I sense your frustration and I share it. From our end, some of those very same people that I'm sure you've noticed, we have offered housing numerous times and they have declined it. But housing, unfortunately, is the only thing that HUD funds, and we don't have the ability to force people to accept it. So this group that I'm a part of at 3CDC, which includes Talbert House and the Hamilton County Mental Health Board and so many other players, are trying to figure out a way to solve that problem. But if the problem is panhandling, we're probably really looking at about a third of the people who are out panhandling, because the sign and what people say when they ask for money is intended to increase how much money they receive. It is not necessarily stating the truth of their circumstance. So
I got what you're saying, but I'm not going to assume everybody that's laying down is a panhandler. I want to ask the administrator, in this money we have, we need to carve out something out of this money to have somebody down here. I want to see data.
well, one more.
Hold on.
We already did something.
Just give me, no, they're not here. I don't see them. I haven't gotten any data. That's why, I guess the guy got up before you got here, but it just doesn't make sense. And I've been saying it over. We can't keep millions of dollars and all these organizations getting money. And you're telling me as a commissioner, we walk out with the money, you're saying, oh, these people are just panhandlers. They need something else. Well, if it's something else, then we need to carve this money out. I want to see a streetwalker myself. I've never seen one. I want to see a streetwalker walking up and down the street. And then show me the data that these people are fake or whatever you said, they're faking it or whatever. Show it to me. But I can't keep going with this money. And you got a good system and you got all these partners. And on here you say you deal with problem solving, you deal with eviction prevention, domestic violence, shelter, and then you have the word the streets. Well, this is a street. And I would just say for me, it would be, well, I'm not going to assume these people ain't homeless. I'm just going to, you telling me every single person that's out in front of this building is not homeless.
I'm telling you that we have surveyed the panhandlers, and 2/3 of them, by their own self-report, when surveyed by a street outreach worker, reported that they were not homeless.
Well, bring me an outreach worker that I want to be able to see when I walk out the door. I've never seen an outreach worker around this, not on this street.
But that speaks to the obstacle from my end of looking at it. What the outreach workers have to offer is housing solutions. And if a person is not homeless, that's not the correct solution. So I agree with you completely that, a solution needs to be found. The problem is that, offering housing to people who are not homeless is not the correct intervention. It unfortunately is the intervention that is funded. The one thing you've already done that I think we still has the opportunity to help, though, is you all set aside $5 million of ARPA funding for homelessness prevention. $3 million of it went into the shelter diversion program, which primarily serves families. The other $2 million hasn't hit the street yet. And because the first 3 went toward families, I would like to see the other 2 targeted specifically at homeless single individuals, which is more likely to be that population. So, but those dollars aren't actually out yet. So that's what I meant when I said you've already done something that could still potentially help with the problem, but until those resources actually get out, we wouldn't see the impact yet.
Got you. So I asked the administrator, where are they at?
So
$2 million, I'm sorry.
yeah, so we're working on that package right now. Holly, you want to give an update on the timing? Kevin's right behind you.
Good afternoon. The $2 million, we have a draft agreement under review right now for these grant programs to hit the street administered by Strategies. So it's back and forth. We're sending it back to the prosecutor's office to finally get it reviewed.
Okay. And then will that give us some visibility? Me personally, I want to be able to see myself.
The way we have it structured right now is it will be a grant program for homeless entities to submit applications for creative ways to prevent homelessness. So it's really up to the experts to put those applications into us via Strategies.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out how to get to where we can see something. Because a lot of times it's out and people say they're doing, I'm not saying they're not doing it, but I gotta have something I can see and touch. And we need to have something that I can see and touch, I guess is what I'm trying to get to. A lot of these agencies, good people, but they always get the money. They've been doing, they've been getting money for years and years and years. And I think Commissioner, I don't want to take her thunder and questions, but I know that was one of the questions that she had frustration. Got the same people getting the same money, doing the same thing, and they're good people. But again, I mean, if you fund something that Procter & Gamble was funding, and they get out there, you say it is, and they come out and they don't see what they funded, you would be jumping up to make sure the funder getting what they ask for. So that's why I'm just
I
saying.
agree with you
yeah.
completely. There is no funding source that has been identified for a program to target panhandlers.
Well,
One of the biggest.
but you assume that these, I don't know if I would call everybody a panhandler. I mean, I would call everybody a panhandler. I mean, I think that's a bit, I wouldn't just put everybody in a pot that you ain't reached. You basically said if you haven't reached them, they must be panhandlers, and I just.
No, we have reached. I mean, there are 12 people whose full-time job it is to be with 4 different organizations out doing street outreach to homeless people who are on the street. But, you sort of run into a where do we go from here situation when you find out the person isn't homeless. And the other thing is, one of my biggest frustration with all the federal government dollars is how restrictive they are of what you can use them for. So, in normal times, the funding for the system is those HUD dollars that would mandate that as soon as you find out that person's not sleeping on the street or in a shelter, you can't work with them anymore. Part of the beauty of what you all have done in terms of allocating ARPA funds toward homelessness is the ARPA funds don't have all those strings attached. They're not so narrow. They don't require you to say, we're not helping that person just because they're not sleeping in this particular place. So there are opportunities with that money that we don't normally have. Gotcha. Same with the Bezos money. There are opportunities there to fill in gaps that we don't normally have resources to fill those gaps.
Gotcha. I'll open it up, Vice President Treehouse.
Thank you, Kevin, for being here. Thanks for the presentation. And thank you for your partnership, especially as we worked our way through COVID. We needed to rehouse the homeless population, and you stepped up with county funding through the CARES Act, and we were able to relocate those people and keep everybody safe and not in a congregate setting. And that took some doing. It helped the hotels. It also helped the homeless population in this county. So I appreciate you stepping up and doing that work. And then helping us figure out how to retrofit the shelters so that when people were able to go back in a safe way, those shelters reflected no-touch soap dispensers, no-touch paper towel dispensers, and barriers between the beds. So it really was a huge undertaking in a response to what we were seeing with COVID, and you are our main partner and all that, so I do appreciate that. You've talked before about this, and I have recognized a shifting landscape in Hamilton County when it comes to the homeless population. To hear you talk, and I think it's reflected in the federal money, the homeless population used to be adult, it used to be male, it used to have a certain demographic represented. That is no longer the case. we've got families, we've got children. Your stats, you prove it out, that there is a changing landscape of homelessness in this county, and as a response, our response to it needs to change and recognize that some of the greatest needs are relative to families and kids. And as you say, some of the young people transitioning. And I have heard from folks that I've spoken with that sometimes because the funding has been so concentrated on single men in the past, that this transition is slow moving, getting to families and getting families in shelter, especially victims of domestic violence. So, is that observation? I think you've even spoken to it, but how is your organization trying to shift, some of the agencies? This is a pretty extensive list of partners. How have you changed your model to respond to that changing demographic that we're trying to serve?
I think the most significant thing we've been trying to do differently for all subpopulations is to be more focused on prevention. The $26 million in HUD Continuum of Care funding requires that a person is already on the street or in a shelter or fleeing domestic violence before we can help them. So said a different way, you can't do anything preventative. Meanwhile, to use our shelter diversion program, which serves doubled up households as an example, that costs about $1,600 per person to keep somebody from ever landing on the street or in a shelter. The price tag for each person who does land on the street or in a shelter is $6,000. So it just costs significantly more. So as you all might notice, regarding the ARPA funding and that, I didn't come knocking on your door or Holly's door or Jeff's door or anybody else's looking for money for housing post-homelessness, because that's where all the federal money goes. It was all about prevention, because we're typically very under-resourced to do anything preventative. And the reasons to do that are, one, it's so much cheaper. You can help more people with the same amount of money. But two, in the case of families, like those are kids who you spare them the trauma of ever moving into a homeless shelter or being on the street, God forbid. So the primary thing is a shift toward prevention, which unfortunately means a shift away from what the federal government money pays for. So that's the main thing we've been focusing on, whether it's single individuals, older people, younger people, families, is to try to be more focused on prevention. But the current reality is we serve about one person in a prevention program for every 6 who end up on the street or in a shelter. So the capacity just isn't there yet. But thanks to you all, our spending in January in the shelter diversion program was over $200,000 in rental assistance for families. And prior to the ARPA funding you put into that program, we were at about $130,000 a month for a long, long time. So we've ramped up that program to serve more and more families specifically. And again, we're hoping that other $2 million will be focused more on single individuals.
So, and just to follow up on that then, and I think we're all very proud of the money that we have allocated for exactly what you say, because you have pointed out, and the focus groups pointed out, when we did the focus groups related to the American Rescue Plan dollars, and got the experts together and said, how would we be most effective trying to keep people from becoming homeless? How would those dollars be used? Those experts, including yourself and others, said, here's the way we would do it. And so the prevention dollars are there, and the administration, of course, supported that and made a recommendation there. So I think I will speak for myself. I'm very proud of the shift that we have made in trying to keep people off the streets, and especially families and kids off the streets. Let me just follow up quickly then. So your partner agencies, I assume this list changes. I know this has changed as you go, because there are different organizations and nonprofits providing services. So can you help us better understand, not necessarily over the last couple of years necessarily, but how is this list changing And when you see a need, Bethany jumps out at me because they serve women and kids. And so how long have they been a partner agency, and how does that work when you see a changing demographic and then you need to identify somebody like Bethany House that's providing that service?
Bethany House is one of the original agencies to get HUD Continuum of Care funding in the county. So, I mean, we've been working with them and funding them with these dollars since 2008. Unfortunately, the HUD formula is very prescriptive. You can't expand grants in that. So, like, they actually receive, I think it's 4 separate funding agreements through us, and that's how they have expanded their capacity. So you just, if there's an expanding demand and need, you just move more funding toward an agency. The primary indicator of how the dollars end up getting distributed is the data that we have on what the demand is among the homeless population. We always, convene our partner agencies as well to talk about, here's where the data indicates we should put the money. What does the data maybe not say clearly? What are your priorities? So we involve the agencies in deciding how the dollars best be used. But then, the last piece is having an agency that's willing to take it on. We are not a direct service agency. We support organizations that want to step into these spaces. So just as I was mentioning to Commissioner Reese that, we don't have an organization that has specifically stepped into that space regarding people who are on the street. We have to have a partner that's willing to take it on. And an organization like Bethany House, thankfully, has been very willing to step in and do more and take on other things. I'll point out one thing that changed in this list just recently. I mean, if you all, through COVID funding, provided us with funding that we supported Maslow's Army to run a day center a couple years ago. They are not currently on this list because they're not currently operating any programs that are serving the homeless. So you're absolutely right that organizations come on and drop off, but it's more based on what they are willing to take on or in a position to take on at that point. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was just, so help me understand then, who are the most recent adds to this list?
The Emergency Shelter of Northern Kentucky takes a person experiencing homelessness 5 minutes to walk across the river, and the river might as well have been 100 miles wide until a couple months ago. They came on to our homeless management information system. So we are able to track the movement of people, and they also provide street outreach services. So that's the first time that we'll be able to use data to track the movement of people back and forth across the river, because we know they go back and forth across the river, but have never really been able to see it. And the funding mechanisms make the river feel like it's 100 miles wide. So they would be the newest. Cincinnati Metropolitan Housing with, actually, are they even on here? Yeah, they are. With that partnership related to the Housing Choice Voucher Program. Those would be 2 recent additions. Then like St. Vincent de Paul, we've worked with them extensively on homelessness prevention regarding a particular pot of money that at this moment is not available, but it's supposed to come back in July. So, there's a lot of back and forth like that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Dumas?
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I want to thank you for the information that was presented. I appreciate that. Some things I didn't know, some I did. Also want to thank CMHA for providing the housing voucher to undergird some of those services that are going out. Your unduplicated people, I don't want to assume anything, but the adults, they're all single. I mean, that's not inclusive at all of children. I know you have it separated, because I'm looking at the children, and are you saying, so maybe you can clarify for me, 1,300 children are out there on their own homeless?
This is street and shelter. So those 1,300 would include mainly 2 groups of children. The first would be children that are in tow with a parent staying in one of our family shelters, and that would be the majority of that 1,300 children. The rest would be the kids I used to work with as a street outreach worker that were under the age of 18 that are on the street unaccompanied by any adult. And unfortunately, that group is still out there.
So it's not really unduplicated people, it's unduplicated services. Because, I mean, it looks like it's just adults.
This is just counting people as people, regardless of what age they are. I can give you, which would not have fit on a PowerPoint slide, I can give you a more comprehensive breakdown of these numbers if you would like. This is simply like a head count, regardless of if they were in a family versus a single individual, that sort of thing. I can give you a count of, households and things like that if you'd like to see it.
Yeah, I don't need that specifics, but I'm just trying to make sure that we're not seeing 1381 children are on the street by themselves.
No, the vast majority of those 1381 were in tow with a parent in a shelter. About 750 to 800 of them, though, were teenagers unaccompanied on the streets.
Also, you mentioned on your partners that you use the YWCA as a partner. And I was just wondering, Women Helping Women, have you considered using them? I know they've talked to me about housing issues and how they have to turn people away, and the ability for them to be able to use some of that money to house maybe in a motel or something.
So the majority, again, of the funding that we administer is for housing programs, and they, to the best of my knowledge, do not operate housing programs. So they partner with the YWCA. We provide the housing dollars to the YWCA.
So they would have to have a specific housing program, not a housing need.
Like the HUD dollars, we can't fund services that are disconnected from housing or shelter with, again, the strings attached to the money that we have to constantly juggle.
Sure.
We can't fund a service in and of itself with those dollars. It has to be connected to housing or shelter. Okay. So my understanding is if they have someone who needs the housing or shelter option, the YWCA could provide it and we fund them.
Great, okay. And then you mentioned about Bezos, the $5 million, and you indicated that you raised $5 million. That's not accurate. You wrote a grant to receive the $5 million?
In order to receive that grant, someone or several someones at the national level had to notice the work you were doing and recommend you to Jeff Bezos, who then invited you to apply for the grant.
Sure.
So you had to be invited to apply. But then, yes, we submitted an application after we were invited saying how we would use the money if it was provided to us, and then we were lucky enough to get it.
So I'm just a stickler on words. When you say you raised money for the $5 million, it's not really. You wrote the grant to receive the money from Bezos, correct?
That is fundraising, but yes, you're correct.
So writing a grant is fundraising? Okay. You get funds as an outcome from writing, okay.
Well, I put fundraising in 3 buckets. You can go out and find a government funding resource to fill a gap in the system. You can do a grant to a foundation to fill a gap in the system, or you can engage private citizens to give on their own. I call all of those fundraising.
So you received a grant from Bezos, right? That's what I wanted to clarify. And so, I guess lastly, maybe next to last, you have a pass-through of 20, you kept saying pass through the money for 22 agencies. And the critical element that's missing from that whole report for me, if you go back to the partners.
To the partner agencies?
I'm asking them to go back, or you going back, okay. The critical part for me is I would like to see in writing for all the partner agencies what they received, the amount of money they received. And that's missing from this total thing. And that's what my major concern was. Do you have partners? You have lots of partners, but there's no numbers on what each one of them has received. And ultimately, it should add up to your total numbers. And that's what I want to see.
Yes, that's fine. The thing to keep in mind, we'll get you that. It may seem complicated simply because if you look at this list of funding sources, I'll use Shelter House as an example. They get COC funding, ESG funding, HOPWA funding. So they get multiple sources of funding. So just so you know that it'll come through as a list of multiple funding agreements for some of the, Bethany House would be similar. They're one of the bigger ones. So they have different funding agreements for different pots of money. But I'd be happy to get that to you.
Sure. And I'm sure it won't be confusing for me. I review grants all the time, so I appreciate that. And I want to know what each one is receiving.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you realize it wasn't all one funding
Oh, it's
stream.
okay, as long as I know how much they're giving and from where. And then I think lastly, Madam President, as we look at a solution for homelessness, I mean, I do agree that some homeless people don't want to be in a shelter for maybe some of the experiences that they've had in that process for other reasons, as you were saying, addictions. But one solution could be, and Holly can correct me if I'm wrong, as we look at affordable housing, I believe it was 17 million to build housing. Oh, okay, that was right. So I'm just thinking about the possibility of small houses, to find a lot somewhere that the county owns, or maybe we don't own, maybe we buy it, that already is set up with water. The electricity is in that same plot of land, and build some small houses. Most homeless people don't have a lot of furniture and things like that. We just need a nice, clean place for them to stay, that's consistent. So I guess I'm throwing this out. As we build housing, let's look at maybe some small housing at a lot that we own with several small houses, and make that an area that we could possibly use for the homeless. And I don't think that would take very long as we get a plot of land that already has the utilities already in there. So that's
I agree with you completely. Most homeless people are not mentally ill. Most are not substance abusers. The piece that are specifically sleeping outside, it's higher, but among the average homeless population, most people do not have those issues. The number one cause of homelessness is the lack of affordable housing. I think that would be a great idea. We've looked at it a few times, and the obstacle that we've always run into is just finding the location.
and we'll do that. We'll find something. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Madam President?
Yes.
Yes,
If I could just briefly, just on,
Yes.
just
you're fine, you're fine.
old habits die hard.
Wait a minute, let me get my, you're fine.
Okay.
Just on a couple of things, on that particular point, we'll definitely work through the affordable housing RFP that we're putting together with CDF to make sure we're trying to strategically draw that connection between affordable housing and the programming as it relates to homelessness directly. So we'll definitely take that on. Also, just wanted to mention a couple of other quick things. First, Holly had mentioned the ARPA dollars for homeless prevention, so I just wanted to call that out, but we already went to that in some of our discussion. But finally, it was mentioned a little bit earlier when I think Kevin was talking about prevention work. I just wanted to highlight again that for the first time ever, the county would be looking at prevention work, and this was highlighted in our budget this year that the board passed, looking at prevention work within the context of the children's services, and recognizing that while homelessness is not necessarily synonymous with abuse, neglect, dependency, or neglect, it certainly can be a causative factor. So we were looking for the first time ever, with the help of Michael Patton and the staff at JFS, an RFP for preventative services to help ensure that families and children don't wind up in a situation that puts them more likely to experience those types of things. So that's really the first time we've ever done this. And I think it's groundbreaking, not only here, but nationally as well. So we look forward to continuing to work with all of our partners and getting that out the door here at early part of the year as well. So just wanted to chime in with those, Madam President.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff, for that. And I just want to say, this board, we have done a lot of new things. We're trying to respond as quick as we're seeing the need, as Vice President Driehaus was saying, and also as Commissioner Dumas has brought out. And we want to make sure that everything we do is measured. Everything we do is measured. And we are working as hard as we can, but I do want to ask what I've learned today. Jeff, I would like to look at when we're doing this flexible $2 million or whatever the money is, I need to see some street people on the street. And I want to see them here and other places that would have multi services. So whatever the person's need is, as indicated by Mr. Finn, it might not just be the homelessness, you got something else. We need to develop that and hit the streets. It just even the optics of we're upstairs and we're doing millions and we're trying to tackle this issue and then get on the elevator and go downstairs and the issue is laying out there and all of us just passed millions of dollars. We can all say it's great and we all believe it's great, but we've got to make sure that the rubber is meeting the road. And I can speak, especially for myself, everything I measure it, does it have an ROI? Did I help the people? And I think that's all of us, that we help the people. And and all of them not asking, I just put the one out, just ask. Everybody's not asking me for money. They laying down, they trying to sleep, and not different things. So if it's not just with your homeless group or whoever, we need, if it's flexible dollars, I need to see some people with some shirts on, walking around, helping people, not me pick up my phone, they might pick up the phone, get them to, do you need a shelter? Do you need mental health? Because we got all these services that we as a board have stepped forward and unprecedented, put millions of dollars in different areas to try to tackle this issue so that we can have one Hamilton County where everybody can partake in the prosperity of the county. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Commissioner Dumas, you had something else?
I just wanted to ask one question.
Yes, go ahead.
The survey that you took regarding the people that are on the street, how many were incoming citizens from the prison or correctional facility? Did you?
I don't recall if that was the question, that was one of the questions that was asked, but I'll go back to it and see if that was in there as well. And I can tell you what information we have when I get back to you with that.
Okay. I was thinking, Madam President, as we look at housing, we specifically talked about reentry housing. And so we may be able to kill two birds with one stone. If whoever's homeless, they're also from the prison, and we're taking care of that at the same time. So.
Could I
Sure.
make you aware of a situation that we've had regarding that? About a year and a half ago, we wanted to bring the Hamilton County Office of Reentry into our shelter diversion program. They had case managers and people to provide services, but no money to put people into housing. So we wanted to bring them into the shelter diversion program. We'll fund the housing. You provide the services and case management. Sounded great. County prosecutor's office shot down the memorandum of understanding, and it never happened. So I would like to think.
Right here, so.
We'll take care of
Get them in trouble, Michael. Michael?
Maybe
No.
we have to revisit that.
We are happy to follow up. I don't know that Michael,
Yeah.
the prosecutor,
There's
is
some-
assigned to that.
Yeah, no.
But we can follow up and find out what the.
Sorry.
That's right, that's right. Yeah, follow up on it. We got new leadership. You never know.
Yeah,
I would love to see that partnership happen.
great.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
So, to the question of folks laying or sitting or whatever outside the building. So you mentioned that there are street outreach people in the community funded by a number of different organizations. So just in order to follow up on that, I think it might be helpful, at least for me, I think for others, to, who are those organizations? Maybe if you could provide that information, how many folks are out there? I see people out there that are ambassadors. I believe is what they're called, moving around in the Central Business District and up and over the Rhine. We're part of one of those districts, actually, here in this building. And so, yeah, I'd like to get a better understanding of that, because as we think about the allocation of the $2 million for preventing homelessness, I do want to better understand the needs. Not to shoot down any ideas or be contrary, but I want to make sure that we're not duplicating something that's already happening. Maybe it's a matter of that service is out there, but not effective for certain individuals. Because, as I've done some tours with Greater Cincinnati Behavioral and walked around with them to engage people that are homeless, because I did not understand, I think I was a state rep at the time, why anybody would choose to be homeless. It's just something I was just unfamiliar with. And so in talking to people, I started to better understand why, as you say, some people don't want to be in a shelter, even though it's very cold outside or it's very uncomfortable where they are. They've got issues that prevent them from being in a shelter. And some folks are setting up camps with others, and they're veterans, and that's just how they choose to live and where they choose to stay. And so I don't have any understanding of whether or not attempts have been made for certain individuals in certain places, but I sure would benefit from that information.
Do you want me to speak to it now, or you want me to get?
Yes.
Okay. So the Greater Cincinnati Behavioral Health is the big one. They run the PATH program, which is federally funded to do street outreach to people who are on the street and have a mental health diagnosis. Then the VA has street outreach, and Lighthouse Youth and Family Services has actually my old program working with young homeless people who are on the street. Then in addition, 3CDC contracts with Greater Cincinnati Behavioral Health to add some additional capacity targeted not specifically at people who have mental health issues only, because PATH is sort of limited to the mental health side of things. So those are sort of the four big players. The 3CDC GCB collaborative targets like substance abusers, PATH is mental health, Lighthouse is young people, the VA is veterans, and they all work very closely together along with the Cincinnati Police Department and others to try to help people who are on the streets. I think that the partnership between GCB and 3CDC would be the likely one to add capacity specifically around panhandling or like those sorts of behaviors to target helping people who have those sorts of behaviors. That would be the likely, again, we always need a partner agency who's sort of willing to take it on. That's who I plan to call about this topic.
Well, as you say, they're not all homeless, and so in some ways, the $2 million that we've allocated for preventing people from becoming homeless is not going to always meet that mark, right? If we're trying to do this with these dollars, so
Correct.
yeah, I just wanted to bring some clarity from.
I've had a lot of conversations with 3CDC where we're all frustrated, where there's someone who was chronically homeless and chronically panhandling, and we get them into housing, and now they have an apartment, but guess what? They're still going out and panhandling. So, that's frustrating, I think, for everybody involved, but we don't have a specific resource, not that we can't find one, but we don't have a specific resource to target that issue in that way. It's like if we've offered them housing, like if that's the only tool we have in the toolbox that we can offer because of some of the funding restrictions, then if they don't want that tool or that doesn't fix the problem, where do we go next? So I agree with you that something more flexible would be helpful.
Yeah, if we had someone like a navigator, it's not like someone says, oh, you're not a veteran, I can't help you, let me keep moving. Oh, no, you don't have behavioral health, that's not my area. Okay? We need a navigator that can hit, 5 things and they can help you. But I wanted to ask the administrator, we pay into a fund, you told me that when I first got elected, a fund to 3CDC. I don't know if it's just them sweeping or
Yeah, so no, well,
power
I
washing, or
think you
do they
both
do
have
anything
referenced
else?
it, the Special Improvement District Fund and the North Central District of the county that we pay into that funds safe and clean services, that type of thing. We'll go back and take a look at that budget and see what services because that comes around for a vote of all the property owners every so often. I don't know the next time that it's up, but when it does, it lists out, here are all the services that we're going to provide over the course of that time. So we'll take a look at that and see if these connection ambassador services were or are supposed to be included in that, and I'll let the board know.
Yeah.
I think it's an issue they're paying a lot of attention to. It's just finding the right solution that we haven't landed on yet.
Yeah, I just want to see a pilot down here. I don't want to vote for millions and go downstairs and it feel like I didn't do nothing. I don't know why it would take so hard. We don't even have to if we got all these people and resources, and I'm looking at a lot of these people we fund for so many things, not just this, I've asked the administrator, can you get us a pilot? If we got these street people that's supposed to be doing this, put somebody out here. I would like to see a pilot. I'd like to see the data myself. Has it changed? As Vice President Driehaus said, maybe the need has changed. Maybe it's not just what was in the past, but what is it, so we can kind of get our hands around it too. I'm not saying go out with a full-fledged program. I'm saying somebody that we funding that's supposedly doing this, come on down here, and I'd like to get some data on what they find. Present day.
The next rub you're going to see is that it's one thing to be able to offer people services. You can't make them take them. So
I got that.
But if
Well,
you're
we
not
can,
offering,
yeah, we
then
can say the same thing. You standing here offering housing and they're not taking it, but somebody is gonna take it, so we funded it. So we can't have this utopia and sound so, giving up. You're here with homeless housing and everybody don't want it, but you still here, you got an organization, and we got a whole lot of people getting money to try to get them to go in the house. So there are people going in, even though it's not 100%. We know we're not gonna get 100%, but we gotta get some help. And I don't know why it's so difficult. I bring up one person to stand here with a shirt out of $32 million to find out what's going on up and down these streets, and I done had almost an hour of why we can't do it. I'm not accepting that. So I'm just saying to somebody, it might not be you, because you just coordinate, but out of all these people, we give more than just your money. We got other stuff we give money to, and I'm saying, I want to see somebody out here. I don't want to hear about what they're not, who they're not, what they're not. They're not going. I don't know if they're going to do it or not, because I haven't talked to them, nor do I have any data to say that they're not people worthy of being offered these services.
I do think it's important to be aware of what the experience is of the average person. So we have about 800 people on any given night in Hamilton County who are on the street or in a shelter, but 6,000 unduplicated people per year. So it's not the same people who are homeless all year long. The homeless population turns over many, many times in the course of the year. So homelessness is typically a very short-term situation. The average length of time someone is homeless in Hamilton County is 46 days. So I just think that's important to keep in mind, because that's not the perception you get when you step out your door, but that is of this building, but that is the reality. That doesn't mean we don't need to do something to help the folks out.
Because when I stepped in the building, it wasn't like that. Now I'm stepping out the building. The more I vote on this, the more I see this happening. When I first walked in the building, that wasn't the case. Now it is the case. So maybe we need to take a look at it. So, Commissioner Dumas, I'm gonna let you close it out.
I don't want to close it, but Madam President, I just wanted to, I had to clarify a misnomer that I heard, is that why do people choose to be homeless? And there is a vast amount of people that do not choose to be homeless. Issues of life have made them homeless. So people that are listening, I want you to know everybody's out there does not want to be out there necessarily. Things have happened. And then you mentioned about the average homelessness is 46 days, and I don't know if I would repeat that number, only because what happened to them in 46? Did they die? Did they get the services that they needed? So you have that data to show where they...
Well, if you notice, I didn't mention it. The fourth window here is exited on their own. So about a third of the people who are on the street or in a shelter, the way they get out of homelessness is by going into one of those housing programs. The others, a family member takes them in, they identify some resource, they get their old job back, they get a couple paychecks under their belt, they move back out. So, 2/3 of people on the street or in shelter find their way out of homelessness on their own. If that's how they exit, unfortunately, they're more likely to come back than if we were able to offer them some support. But most people get out on their own.
So are you able to track that Henry went here and there? You're able to track that. Can I see that?
Well, there are between 11 and 12,000 people a year that go through the system. I'd need
You said you track them. I'm not saying for the whole history of what you're doing, but I don't know, the last few years, how many, 46 days is the average that they're out on the street? So are you doing follow-up? Are you able to track that? How do you know it's 46 days?
Because as I mentioned, the average person, 85%, when they become homeless in Hamilton County, they go into a shelter and they exclusively stay in shelter, and then they exit homelessness. They don't go to a different shelter. We don't find them on the street, and the average shelter length of stay is 46 days
So how are you tracking that? How do you know that?
through our homeless management information.
I'd like to see some of that information. Okay, thanks. That's all I have.
Mr. Finn, you got a hard job. We thank you, but I would say that this board, for us to make, homelessness, ending homelessness, obviously, is very important to us. We know it's very hard to do, but we thought we needed to take the appropriate time in our committee and in our budget. We're not just talking, all of us have put it in, put money up, and then making sure that whatever we're doing is keeping up with what the needs are.
I appreciate your time, and I really appreciate how supportive you have been.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Okay, next on the agenda. Let's head to St. Bernard. Let's have Harry Blanton from Alloy Development talk about the Enterprise Zone Agreement.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for your time. I am Harry Blanton with Hamilton County Economic Development Office. And today we have before you some information about an enterprise zone that you'll consider a week from Thursday. It's with BASF in St. Bernard, as you mentioned, Commissioner Reese. I will have a couple of speakers come up here as well. We'll have Tasso Rigopoulos, who is the site director with BASF. He's also here with us today is his associate Mike Feldman with BASF. And then after I give you some more information, after Mr. Rigopoulos talks, we'll have Mayor Jonathan Stutchell come up from St. Bernard to give their support as well. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Rigopoulos to give a little overview.
Welcome.
All right, good afternoon. And thank you for this opportunity to introduce you to the BASF operations. BASF, you kind of wondering, what that means, right? So is Baden Aniline and Soda Factory, and Baden is the original location where the company was actually originated in Germany. We are one of the leading chemical companies in the world. BASF headquarters are in Ludwigshafen, Germany, where also our biggest manufacturing site is located with over 39,000 employees. Globally, BASF employs about 111,000 people. In North America, we have more than 150 production and R&D sites and about 17,000 employees. Our location here has its original roots deep in Cincinnati history. It was founded in 1840 by the Emery family. Locally, we employ about 180 people in making products for applications in home and personal care, detergents, adhesives, agriculture, lubricants, and automotive. The project that we are presenting today supports our customers that manufacture cosmetics, personal hygiene, and cleaning products that make life easier, safer, and more sustainable. This expansion will increase the capacity of our bio-based surfactants manufacturing. These surfactants are made from renewable raw materials such as coconut oil and corn, and they support the global trend towards sustainable source products. These bio-based surfactants, for example, were heavily used in several disinfectant products like Lysol and soaps, which are still critical products to fight acute diseases like COVID and flu. We are also very proud of our safety record, having gone more than 6 years without an OSHA recordable injury, 8 years without a lost time injury, and safety and the well-being of our employees and the community is one of our key values. Continuing and expanding the production of bio-based products is also in alignment with the BASF's global initiative called Net Zero 2050. We offer our customers solutions that help prevent greenhouse gas emissions and improve energy and resource efficiency. More than 40% of our annual research and development goes towards projects to make our processes more energy efficient and to prevent greenhouse gas emissions. Since 1990, we have cut our global CO2 emissions in half. By 2030, we want to reduce our emissions by 25% compared to 2018. And by 2050, we are aiming for net zero CO2 emissions. We are also dedicated attracting and hiring talent by developing people who bring diverse backgrounds, perspectives, and experience in our team. This expansion will secure and bring additional jobs at the site and support the local economy. But we are heavily competing with other regions in the world, and your local support for tax abatement will play a key role in the decision-making process. We want to bring more manufacturing opportunities locally to secure and create sustainable growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rigopoulos. And I'm going to give you a quick details of the project itself. So as you see up on the screen, we have a photo of aerial of BASF. As you can see, the Mill Creek cuts through their site, but they have a campus with 180 employees. If you see on the enterprise zone, it only mentions 40 jobs because those jobs are the jobs that are in St. Bernard, but there is also an additional 140 jobs on the site, and part of them are in Cincinnati and part of them are in St. Bernard. This is a project that will create 9 new jobs and retain 31 jobs. They are going to build a new 20,000 square foot facility. It's going to double the capacity that they have at the site right now. As I have not mentioned yet, but it's a $70 million project. 45 million of that is for this expansion of this building. As you know, chemical companies, their investments in machinery equipment is very expensive, and also in their buildings, so it's a very large investment. As it'll also create 100 construction jobs over 2 years of construction. And as Mr. Rigopoulos mentioned, they are in competition with other BASF locations in Asia, so the tax incentive is important to them to be competitive. And I should point out that these jobs are very high-paying jobs. If you notice, the current jobs pay almost $100,000 per employee. The new jobs are, I think, close to $90,000 per employee, so they're very high-paying jobs. We are recommending a 75% for 10-year enterprise zone tax abatement. And St. Bernard has already passed a resolution supporting that. The project begins in spring of 2023 and then completed by spring of 2025. And I'd like to bring up Mayor Stutchell to show the support of St. Bernard. And then we'll entertain your questions.
Thank you for letting me be here. Again, I'm Jonathan Stutchell from Village of St. Bernard. The Village of St. Bernard, our council unanimously passed a resolution supporting the 10-year abatement on 75% of the improvements to the real property. St. Bernard has been very fortunate to have such great industrial partners. And again, this improvement and addition to what we already have goes right along with what we're trying to support with retention of our industrial partners. And this kind of investment is probably the largest investment we've had in some period of time on that side of the Mill Creek, which many people in St. Bernard don't even realize is there. So again, we're very fortunate, again, knowing that they are willing to make this kind of an investment, knowing this is the only stateside location that was even considered, and to think that it's even in St. Bernard, which I like to consider as being the center of it all. So again, we are very excited about that, to know that it's between us and a location in Asia. We feel that with the already existing infrastructure, as far as with the transportation, the highways, the excellent rail system, that this would support this very well. So again, we are very much in favor of this and really look forward to this great project. So, ultimately, there wasn't any question about this from our council members. Everyone, again, was in support. And I think the community as a whole, once they were able to learn more, about the process and the excitement of the green infrastructure as far as the green surfactants and environmentally conscious, everyone is very much in favor. So again, if any questions you have from any of these gentlemen, sure will be welcomed. And again, we look forward to this exciting project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
So if there are any questions, we'll be happy to answer those for you.
Okay, great. I'll open up. I want to, first of all, Mayor, congratulations to you and St. Bernard for competing internationally. And certainly very important. I know you have a lot of manufacturing in the area as well. We're not going to talk about my chili time. Oh, very sensitive, very sensitive. But again, being that we're competing with Asia, and Hamilton County through St. Bernard is competing, I think it says a lot in the package, and want to thank staff and everybody that worked together, to Mark and Holly, and of course that brought this deal where we're competitive. So I just wanted to say congratulations on that. I will open it up to Vice President Driehaus.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you all for being here. Can you bring up the map again so we can see the location? It wasn't. Okay. So I have a question regarding the environmental impact of this. I was glad to hear about the plan, the ongoing plan to become more environmentally friendly. And Mayor, I don't know if there's a question for you or the other gentleman. I'm not going to even try to pronounce your name. Right, but a number of years ago, we had some concern about air pollutants in St. Bernard. I don't know if BASF was one of the industries that was implicated in all that, but you remember in Winton Hills in particular, there was a lot of concern about odor and noxious fumes and that kind of thing. And so we tried to reach out to some of the manufacturers, and Greg Landsman was a partner on City Council when we were doing this work, and tried to get the industries to respond to some of the air quality concerns. Now that has gone away, and it was a particularly hot summer, as I recall, and that did exacerbate the issue. But with an expansion like this, I think from my perspective, I want to be 100% sure that this is not going to create any issues or build upon any issues that have been environmental challenges by way of air quality in the past. I think it was St. Bernard, but I think it was really downwind of St. Bernard where we were having some issues. So I don't know if anybody is able to speak to that issue or that concern.
BASF perspective, I'm not familiar with any of those issues in the location that we are in right now. But from an expansion perspective, I can tell you this is green chemistry, right? We're not generating any kind of hazardous materials. It's just really chemistry for the future. So I do not have personally any concerns regarding that. Now, if there is something specific that you can reference of, I can go back and I can look at some specifics coming from different companies around the area that they have created that problem in the past.
I will do that research because we were involved in the testing in Hamilton County, and it took some resource and some effort and some time to get all that done. This has been probably, 4 years ago, maybe something like that. But again, as we think through the impacts of an expansion, let me do that research and find out if we ever found out, who was contributing to that. I do remember BASF, but I do not remember the outcome of that. So if the commission, with the deference of my colleagues, give me a minute to do that research, to figure that out, and then circle back with you. Because again, I'm not opposed to this necessarily. I mean, generally, increasing jobs, increasing manufacturing, this is generally a good thing. But I do remember this air quality issue, and I just want to make sure that that's been buttoned up.
Yeah, by all means, please send me the information. I'll follow up.
Thank you.
On that point, can you tell us what the time, are we in competition? Is there a deadline we have to worry about, or?
Yes, so we are going to our own Commission S in May 5th, but the decision is very important for the business to make the decision in which location will be made by mid-March, latest.
Okay.
Madam President?
Yes.
On the specific issue, I think Mark Von Allman, who runs the economic development activities up here on this floor, I think he's worked or has talked with Environmental Service on this. Mark, do you have something to add on this particular point?
Mark.
Something to add. I don't know if it's directly in response to the previous effort that you're referencing, but we did check in with Environmental Services about this project just because of the nature of it. They had mentioned to us that for this project, there was a permit application received in January, submitted to Environmental Services. They are currently reviewing it. They have reviewed it to an extent so far, and nothing gives them pause to date. They anticipate forwarding it to Ohio EPA, and Ohio EPA approving the permit by the end of March. They also added that odor has been a concern in the St. Bernard community and surrounding communities in the past. Over the past 5 years, complaints are going down. Also, over the past 5 years, all of the complaints that have been submitted have not been able to be linked directly to BASF. So they were able to provide that context.
Yeah, 'cause again, I don't remember any conclusive evidence about who was contributing to the odor, but it was a significant issue for a neighboring community. So if we could get that information, that'd be very helpful.
We have that information today, but happy to look into further to the kind
Yeah,
of
that'd be great.
broader issue. and
As,
get back
as
to
far
you.
as that specific, remember, I don't know if you all remember that specific issue. We had town hall meetings down there to talk about this, and EPA did get involved. So I'll work with you, Mark, to look into it.
Yeah, and Mark, will you let us know what the timeline, I would just want to make sure, if it comes back nothing, but we missed the timeline, we don't want that either. I think all of us want to, if it's nothing, we want to beat out Asia. If it's something, then obviously, then that's a different situation. So we need to know what the deadline for us to act, and so we can get the information in a timely fashion.
As of right now, it's set to be on the agenda for next week on Thursday, but we can talk about how intentional we need to be with that timeline.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like we've got the information. I mean, we did a bunch of research back then, and this was a public housing project that was impacted. It was in Winton Hills, and there was a lot of concern about this. So I just want to button it up. That's all. So we'll figure it out.
And I just want you commissioners to understand that we also do a checklist, and one of the things that we check is with the Department of Environmental Services to make sure that whenever we give a tax incentive that there aren't any issues. So we did do that check, but I think Mark's done a lot more research, which is great. So
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, please? Okay, Commissioner Dumas?
Thank you, Madam President. I have to ask this question. I imagine the answer is no, but it doesn't impact any residential because it's zoned industrial, correct? Expansion doesn't impact any residential.
correct, yes.
Yeah, that's what so when you look at this map, the new and the old, which one is, the new is on the left? The expansion, what part is the expansion?
It's on the right side.
It's on the right?
See where it says Mill Creek right there?
Yeah,
It's right below that area.
okay,
It's actually where it says BASF Corp.
yeah,
The right side is
the right side, okay. So I'm interested in, since the line goes over the Mill Creek area, how do you accommodate that? I mean, how are you accommodating as it reaches out over the Mill Creek area? Huh?
That's the boundary line of our property.
But,
And announce yourself, please. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mike Feldman. I'm the engineering manager for the BASF plant. And as Tassa was saying, if you look just below the word Mill Creek and go straight down, you can see that's an area of our plant that is undeveloped right now. It's just basically dirt and grass out there now. So we're going to be building this plant within our property lines already.
so the line just indicates the boundary line, not where the plant itself is.
Correct. These are our property lines.
That's all I
That's not the outline of the expansion.
easier if I can point it exactly right. So the new plant will be right here.
Oh, okay.
You can picture a square right there.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. And I just want to thank all of you for your requests, because when I say that, not only for the good that it's going to do for the county and St. Bernard, but the fact 75% for 10 years is respectable. And so oftentimes, people come in with 100% and 30 years. Don't think about that. But I just appreciate you doing that and being respectful of the county. So thank you so much. Looking forward to it. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. So our next steps are we comfortable putting it on the calendar for Thursday, or do we need to delay another week? What do we?
We could, so it sounds like the
Administrative.
information we have is information that can be compiled and forwarded to the board fairly quickly. So I would err on the side of leaving it on the agenda for the expeditious nature of the project. And then if something were to happen, you could always hold it. But I don't think we'll be in that position.
Okay.
The information to you in time to make the
We
decision.
will pull it off if you don't know what the answers.
Okay.
So once you're comfortable, we'll just leave it on if everything's okay.
Okay. Everybody good with that?
That was you.
Okay. Well, everything goes good. St. Bernard, we're on our way. One Hamilton County, more jobs. And we'll work on that chili time later. All right, thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for coming down. I really appreciate it, and thank you, Harry, Mark, and Holly, for all your work. Now we have an executive session. I will make a motion to go in executive session pursuant to RC Section 121.22G3 to conduct a conference with an attorney for public body concerning the subject of pending litigation.
Second.
Commissioner Reese.
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yes.
Commissioner Summer Dumas.
Yes.
back. We have a resolution. I'll ask the administrator to read the resolution.
Thank you, Madam President. So this resolution spurs, as an extension of the county's and the state's continued efforts to resolve the opioid issues that the county has joined the lawsuit with the state against manufacturers and distributors of opioids. The state and its partners continue to enter into settlement agreements with those manufacturers and distributors. This is the latest in that round of settlements. So before you today is a resolution to accept the settlement agreement with Meyer Inc., Meyer Distribution Inc., Meyer Stores Limited Partnership, and Meyer Great Lakes Limited Partnership. The administration recommends approval.
I'll make a motion to pass the resolution read by the administrator.
Second?
Commissioner Reese.
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yes.
Commissioner Summer Dumas.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Commissioner Reese.
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse.
Yes.
Commissioner Summer Dumas.
Yes.